on the CINA 102.3 app at cinafm.com, on TuneIn, on smart speaker, and at 102.3 FM. Cina Radio, every device, everywhere. The following program does not necessarily reflect the opinions of the management, staff, or advertisers of Cina Radio.
Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on giant billboards across the metro. Joumana Kayrouz. You've seen her images on buses across the city. Now get to know Joumana Kayrouz.
The war broke out in my home country, Lebanon. I was 11 years old, and I saw a lot of bloodshed and inequality and poverty. You can't grow up in an environment like that and not be affected by it and not want to make a difference. I graduated from Yale University with a master's in ethics. I speak 4 languages. It has always been innate in me fighting for the underdog and trying to do whatever it is I can to make a difference in the world.
Let Joumana Kayrouz protect your rights. Call the law offices of Joumana Kayrouz at 1-866-YOUR-RIGHTS, extension 100, or visit yourrights.com.
برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز المختصة في قضايا حوادث السيارات، مع نخبة من المحامين في اختصاصات عدة منها الطلاق والهجرة والإفلاس، يأتيكم الآن على الهواء مباشرة. أسعد الله أوقاتكم بالخير مستمعينا في كل مكان، ونرحب بكم في حلقة جديدة من برنامج يور رايتس مع المحامية جومانا كيروز على الهواء مباشرة. أرقام الهواتف في الاستوديو 313-769-6666 519-256-1023، وأيضا بإمكانكم المشاركة عن طريق التواصل معنا على الواتساب برسائل نصية أو صوتية، والرقم هو 313-327-7074. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تستقبل قضاياكم المتعلقة بالإصابات الشخصية من ضمنها حوادث السيارات، إصابات العمل والأخطاء الطبية، الهجرة والتجنس، قضايا الإفلاس، قضايا الضمان الاجتماعي وقوانين العائلة والكريمينال لو. الاستشارات مجانية، والرقم هو 248-557-3645. تحياتنا لكم. جومانا، مساء الخير ورحب بك في برنامج يور رايتس.
مساء الخير رامي،
أهلا وسهلا.
كيفك اليوم؟
الحمد لله، نسأل عنك إن شاء الله تمام.
كتر خير الله. مساء كل المستمعين، الله يا رب ويك اند سليم وممتع. كمان مرة ليبر داي ويكند. ضيفتنا لليوم هي كانت ضيفتنا نهار الجمعة كمان، لأنه نحن قلبنا الجدول تبعها، وبالعموم نستضيفها كل نهار ثلاثاء المحامية ماريا بانشينكو، اللي هي اختصاصية في مكتبنا بقضايا الفاميلي لو والكريمينال لو. فمنرحب فيها. ماريا, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Joumana.
How are you doing?
Doing pretty good today. How are you guys doing?
I am good. You had a good weekend?
Yes, everything was very good. I wish we had a little bit of better weather where we were because it started to rain, but
yesterday was amazing weather actually. يعني بارحة كان جو رائع جدا، واليوم شفتي بلحظات Michigan.
Yes, this is Michigan for you. If you don't like it, wait 15 minutes or at most a day. That's right. امبارح طقس كتير حلو. أولت امبارح مكان، اليوم رح نقول سيء. احنا بحاجة للمطر مثل ما بحاجة للشمس.
طبعا طبعا. جمان، قبل ما يعني تفوتون بتفاصيل القضايا القانونية، وأكيد اليوم كثير معلومات قيمة راح تقدميها على الهواء مع المحامية ماريا. سمعنا في جاب opportunity عندكم في الآفس جومانا، حبينا نسلط الضوء بشكل سريع على هذه النقطة للأشخاص اللي عندهم كفاءات معينة حابين يشتغلوا في مكتب جومانا كيروز. ما هو البوزيشن حاليا اللي المتاح عندك في المكتب؟
شكرا رامي، شكرا انه عم تسمح لي احكي عن هالشي على الهواء. نعم، نحن عم ننبه موظف او موظفة تكون ليجل، مش ضروري تكون راح لباراديل سكول او بخص المحاماة لحتى تكون عندها فئة انه تقدم. قبل كل شيء لازم هذا الشخص يحكي العربي والانجليزي بطريقة جيدة جدا. كمان مرة انا بقول لأنه بعد سابقة انه في اشخاص بيتصلوا بس الانجليزي تبعهم مش جيد، ما يضيعوا لنا وقتنا. اول ما نشعر انه الانجليزي تبعهم، احنا مكتب محاماة بالولايات المتحدة، صحيح نحن شرقيين واغلبية الموكلين اللي عنا، وانما ليس كل الموكلين عنا بيتكلموا عربي، بس نحن بنتعامل مع المحاكم بالانجليزي، مع insurance companies بالانجليزي، مع كل شيء يعني بالطريقة الإنجليزية. الإنجليزي لازم يكون جيد جدا. خبرة سابقة مفروض تكون موجودة عندهم بمكتب، من الأفضل مكتب محاماة. يعني الأشخاص اللي عندهم خبرة سابقة بمكتب محاماة عندهم الأولوية، وإنما خبرة سابقة بمكتب، وبالأخص بمكتب يعني professional setting ضروري جدا. الدفع هو مشابه للخبرة، يعني كل ما الإنسان عنده خبرة أكتر، بالأخص إذا كانت خبرته بقانون بمجال قانوني، كل ما الدفع بيكون أحسن. بنقدم benefits إن كان health insurance، إن كان vacation pays ولا غير أشياء. والبوزيشن رامي هي full time position.
نعم.
يعني يعني اللي بيتصلوا تلاميذ وما فيني اجي هيدا النهار هذا النهار، ما يضيعوا وقتهم ويضيعوا لنا وقتنا. It's a full time position من التنين للجمعة، من الساعة 9 الصبح ل5 بعد الظهر. يعني it's a full time position. part time employees need not apply، ما يضيعوا وقتهم. واللي بيهموا يتصل على مكتبنا 248-557-3645 كمان 248-557-3645. بضيف شغلة إنه هي بمكتبنا وبالتحديد هيدا should not affect anybody، بس بالتحديد هو مش مع محامي أو محامي البانكربسي أو حتى ماريا، هو بقانون حول السيارات، يعني بالديبارتمنت اللي أنا أيضا، وهذا الشخص هيدي السيدة اللي حتكون تحت إيدي، ونحن we are to train، بس يكون في مثل ما قلنا خبرة سابقة بمكتب. الإنجليزي والعربي جيد جدا، لازم يكون full time job، ومن كثير benefits.
إن شاء الله. ممتاز. فنتمنى التوفيق لكل الأشخاص اللي يعني حابين يشتغلوا. أكيد مكتبك يعني مكتب معروف ومرموق جمانة، فهذه فرصة كبيرة للأشخاص اللي حابين يتقدمون في مسيرتهم المهنية، وأيضا يشتغلوا في جو يعني أنا زرت المكتب أكثر من مرة وشفت الأجواء العائلية اللي عندكم حقيقة، والحرص وأيضا الدقة في العمل، وكأنه الكل يشتغل كخلية نحل. فكل التوفيق إن شاء الله لمكتبكم وللشخص اللي راح يكون مؤهل للعمل في المكتب إن شاء الله يا رب.
ثانك يو رامي، ثانك يو على كلامك اللطيف. بتذكر من زيارتك لعنا انه يو ار سيلبرتي، كلهم كانوا بدهم يتعرفوا عليك وسالوك عن بنتك الصغيره
نوجه لهم كثير يعني تحياتنا اكيد لكل العاملين في المكتب، وان شاء الله يا رب دوم الموفقيه لكل العاملين معك جمانة.
ثانك يو فيري ماتش يا رامي. بنستقبل كمان مره المحاميه ماريا بانشينكو. نهار الجمعه حكينا كثير عن البي بي اوز، حكينا هؤلاء القوانين اللي صاروا المدعيين العام عم يستعملون لحتى يعملوا كنترول على اللي احنا عايشين فيه، لحتى العالم ما تضايق بعضها عبر السوشيال ميديا، عبر استعمال التليفون، عبر استعمال الكمبيوتر. اليوم رح ننقل لقضايا الفاميلي لو. طبعا نحن بنتلقى اتصالاتكم، اسئلتكم، لربما بتستعملوا اكثر واتساب اللي هو 313-327-7074. نعرف مواضيع مواضيع حساسة، ويمكن ما بتريدوا تسمعوا صوتكم. بس اليوم رح ننتقل شوي لفاميلي لو. أنا رح أنقل مكان رامي بس ما بعرف شو القصة. بعتذر إنه الصوت عم بيقطع إذا أحسن. ما هيك أحسن ولا صار أحسن؟ لا بعده مش أحسن. بعتذر. أول شيء بدنا نبلش في دراسة طلعت هلأ طلعت عن البانديميك وتأثير البانديميك على العلاقات الزوجية بين الطرفين. الدراسة فرجت إنه صعود الطلاق هو 35% بأبريل تبع هالسنة، 3 أسابيع من بعد ما بلش اللوك داون. رح بلش احكي عنها شوي هيدي الدراسة، ورح ننتقل لمواضيع اليوم. بدنا نحكي اليوم عن شيء اسمه spousal support وأي مثل مؤهل يحصل عليها. بدنا نحكي كمان إذا الوقت سمح لنا شيء بيسموه legal separation، يعني اللي هو بين الرجل والامرأة، هو انفصال قانوني، هو غير طلاق، وشو منافعه وشو ممكن الإنسان يستفيد وشو أسبابه أغلبية الأوقات. يعني اللي بيحبوا يعملوا legal separation مش طلاق، واي ليش عم بيفكروا يفوتوا بالليجل سيبريشن مش بالطلاق. بنبلش شوي بالدراسة. Attorney Maria Panchenko, good again.
Good afternoon.
I want to start by talking about the survey that came up. It came up recently. However, it is about the behavior that we have seen among couples old and new, 3 weeks after the pandemic hit. Most states shut down in the middle of March to the third week of March. The study that I am talking about is about people's behaviors and their desire to file for divorce only 3 weeks after the lockdown. Can you share with me some of your thoughts about that study? Or maybe I should start by saying that again, people's behaviors were studied on April 13, which is 3 weeks after the lockdown started. And they saw that the desire to file for divorce increased up to 34%. And the theory is very clear to everybody. The pandemic has hit a lot of people. And the study says that the pandemic has caused irreparable damage, meaning damage you cannot repair, to a lot of relationships. And that's because of confinement, people in each other's face, because of unstable jobs, decreased finances, unemployment, mental illness, but also child care. So the interesting part about the study is that all it took is 3 weeks, as the study has stated, for marriages to begin to crumble. Did you have a chance to read the study?
I did.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, Maria, the group of people who was hit the hardest, whose marriages began to crumble 3 weeks after the lockdown began, are people who had been married less than 5 months, newlyweds.
Right.
Yeah, 20, and feel free to interrupt me anytime you want. 20% of those people who were newly married this year, compared to 11% of newly married last year, were already thinking about divorce. So that means the study says couples who were married somewhere between January and March were already discussing separation between April and June. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that when people get married, you're marrying into a situation that this person has this kind of job, this person has this kind of financial stability, this person has this kind of behavior and personality. And I think that when we went into lockdown, everything changed for everybody. Yes, some people had to stay home from work. Some people lost their work and their paycheck altogether. And it put people into a funk that might have otherwise been in a state of normal in their personality. It can be depressing to sit at home all day and not have anywhere to go or anyone to see or anything to do. It was still, in Michigan at least, it was still pretty cold outside as well. So although we could go for walks and bike rides, it was somewhat chilly. And I think that it affected everybody down to their very personality. And for people who are newlyweds, going through something traumatic and depressing and something hard like this right at the beginning of your marriage can really kind of push you over the edge. I mean, sometimes it takes years for somebody to go through a marriage before they start seeing little things about your personality, right, that you might not necessarily care for. You don't necessarily have to be around it all day. You go to work, or the person goes to work, or you spend time outside with your friends or family, and you have an outlet of some kind. Wherein with the pandemic, these newlyweds were forced to confront a very real, very traumatic experience for the entire world, at the same time as being forced to confront one another 24/7 without any break, and getting to know, how somebody reacts to that kind of situation a little bit too soon, maybe.
I agree with you. You said something that I 100% agree with when you said that if you had an outlet, then you can go out and do something different. But if you are forced to stay with somebody 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it makes it very hard. How are you going to run away from this person and have an outlet and get it out of your system? Um, Two things before we move on about today's topic, which God willing, it will be about spousal support and legal separation, if our time permits. Is the study said? I agree. I think it makes sense. The study said that generally divorce filings decrease with each year you are married. In other words, people who have been married 15 years are less likely to divorce than people who have been married 10 years or 5 years. So the more people stick it out together, it seems, or maybe the more they have in common, whether it is financial or children or a combination of all, the less likely they're going to jump into divorce. Is that your experience as a family law attorney as well?
Yes. Most times I'm seeing divorces with 10 or less years in marriage.
And you agree that the more marriage between them, the less likely the divorce rate decreases.
I agree with that. I think that the longer you've been together, the more you've realized whether or not you can handle certain situations, such as a traumatic event, how your partner responds to that, and, whether or not you are all on the same page during the different things that we all go through in life.
However, as we wrap up this discussion, we know that there will be an increase in divorce filings. The study was not about filing for divorce. The study looked, as tracking people's behavior and looking at the internet, going to certain sites that allow you to look at divorce papers and documents and do-it-yourself divorce. So this study was about interest as soon as 3 weeks after the lockdown. April, very specifically, they say in that study, April 13, they noticed the highest amount of interest in wanting to file for divorce. We're not saying that on April 13, a lot of people actually file for divorce, because the greatest majority of people hire lawyers because it's not that easy to go through the process and the electronic filings of filing for divorce and so forth. Now, today, we know a lot of people are unhappy. However, there is not a lot of divorce filings, especially among lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And I believe the reason is that people they feel unsafe. They don't know if we're going into lockdown again. They don't know if they are going to keep their job. They don't know what the future, especially financially, holds. So they are hesitant. Even those, if marriages were irretrievably broken as early as 3 weeks after the lockdown began, imagine now, even though they know they need to divorce or have made the decision to file for divorce, we're still not seeing those numbers because people cannot afford right now to go through divorce and support and child custody and having separate households and 2 mortgages or 2 rents and 2 electrical bills and food here and food there. Do you agree with me?
I do. I agree with you. I think that the financial concern is of extreme importance to a lot of people in all different situations, especially those that are considering getting a divorce.
Yes. And of course, we don't wish divorce on anyone, but we know it's going to happen. So what we are noticing is there is hesitation because we are still financially unstable. In fact, I think Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, is about 15% unemployment, harder hit than other states nationally. So a lot of people, they're happy they're back to work, but they don't know if this is going to change, if their employer is going to trim down, if there will be another lockdown in the fall, with students returning to school, with students going back to college. I believe, Rami, you were mentioning today, Binashrit, that a number of University of Michigan students were diagnosed with
Right.
the virus.
Yes, about
Uh,
124.
124, and I believe that was their first week back to college, correct?
Correct. Yes, correct.
And now you have the flu coming in at very unstable.
Right. It's a very extremely anxious time for everybody on so many different levels. Everyone is very nervous about everything that could possibly, what if this or what if that, and what if in a marriage can make a lot of wheels start turning. And so I can understand why this study came out with the results that it did.
Right. Thank you very much, Maria. I want to remind the listeners we are talking for an hour today with attorney Maria Panchenko, our family law and criminal law attorney. We know a number of people don't like to call on the air. The radio WhatsApp number is 313-327-7064. Attorney Maria Panchenko, we had a caller or somebody who called the office who had a question about spousal support. It to be called alimony. And after you had your discussion with him, he changed his mind and does not want to go through a divorce because he does not want to pay for alimony or spousal support.
That's right. He didn't want to take the risk of, he was contemplating divorce and decided that he didn't want to take the risk of paying spousal support to his current wife if he were to go ahead and elect to go forward with the divorce, which in our conversation, I quickly realized he would likely have to do.
Yes, because if you become so unhappy, we wish that the relationship would improve for them, but the relationship doesn't. I think he'll be calling again, whether this office or any other office, because spousal support or no spousal support, you're very unhappy. We assume you're very unhappy in a marriage that's irretrievably broken. So it may get to a point where he will say again, I don't care if I pay spousal support, I want to be happy.
Yeah, and that is something that will happen. A lot of times people take their time making the decision, and I think that's a great idea. You're not sure, obviously. But eventually, if the core cause of the reasoning that you want to get divorced is still there and you're not able to rectify it or change what is the underlying problem, at some point, paying spousal support won't be a problem for you anymore. If the underlying issues that are causing you to consider divorce do not get resolved, eventually the divorce will happen. And the longer you're together, the longer the spousal support will continue, and the more you'll have to end up having to pay in spousal support too. It's kind of a vicious circle, right?
We want to start by saying that the law does not say that if you get divorced, you are to pay your wife or your husband's spousal support. The law says that there are a number of factors that a court can consider in determining whether this is the kind of divorce or separation that merits spousal support to somebody else. Let's talk about this gentleman very quickly. His wife never worked. She has no skill set. She does not speak English. Most importantly, he's been in this marriage for 25 years. So this is a long, long marriage to a woman who has never worked, who does not have any work skill set, who does not speak English. She only speaks Arabic. And he makes $150,000 a year. So the combination of all these factors together, you told him that you are almost 100% certain that that would be the kind of case where if he were to either legally separate or divorce his wife, he is going to be asked to pay spousal support because this is a marriage that is long. He makes so much good money and she has no skill set to return to the workforce.
Yes, with his few factors that he gave me, I was able to determine that it is likely what we say, a case for spousal support. So it's definitely going to be something that the court's going to be looking at. It's something that if you do file for divorce and she were to get an attorney, that attorney would definitely be pursuing.
And before we talk about some of the factors that the law says the judge may look into, although no one factor it's a combination. You said to me in preparing for this show today, you said once you hit the 10-year mark in your marriage, once you hit the 10-year marriage mark, especially if the other person does not work, and if your income is more than, and you're saying generally, so please, to all of our listeners, this is a general discussion. But generally speaking, once a marriage hits the 10-year mark, and especially if the other person doesn't work, and if the person's income, one person's income, the working person's income is more than $60,000 a year, this looks like a case for spousal support or alimony.
Yes. Once I hear the 10-year number, I start asking more questions about spousal support factors to see if whether or not it truly is a spousal support case. Because at 10 years, there's a lot of cases that have gone on, case law up at the Court of Appeals, the higher courts that have said that is the length of time. It's, like you said, a general statement, because there are people who are paying spousal support that were married less than 10 years and more than 10 years. But 10 years is a good starting point to start having a conversation with our clients about whether or not they're going to be forced to pay spousal support in their case, or whether or not spousal support might not be something they will receive because of the different sets of circumstances that they have in their marriage.
Before we take a question we just received, very quickly, and before we move to the factors that a court looks at to determine if this is the case for spousal support, you said income, when one of the two people has an income, say over $60,000 a year, then if you were representing the non-working spouse, it would make also a case for spousal support.
Yes, I would. If I hear the number 60,000, that's when I start thinking, okay, I need to get some more information because there might be some spousal support. If somebody is making very little amounts of money, spousal support, even though you have the 10-year marriage, spousal support still might not be appropriate because they just make too little an amount of money per year. It doesn't, again, general statement, like you said before, Joumana, it doesn't mean that some people who make less than 60,000 aren't paying spousal support. There are people out there that are. But that's when most lawyers are going to think to themselves, okay, $60,000 plus per year and 10 years plus marriage. We need to start considering all of the factors to determine what, if any, spousal support is involved in this case.
Okay. Let's take this question from Luna, who asks, can I change my name at the time of divorce? So I assume she wants to drop her married legal name. Is that something, Attorney Maria Panchenko, that you can do in one swoop? Or do you have to go through the very, very, very demanding and paper-intensive process of legal name change?
No, if you're getting divorced, we can change your name at the final judgment of divorce. I've actually had people that change their first and last name in a judgment of divorce. So you absolutely can kind of bypass the name change process in your judgment of divorce.
Okay, because generally speaking, if somebody wants to change their name legally, it is a very paper-intensive. Yes, you can do it on your own, but normally, there are so many pitfalls, you'd better hiring a lawyer. So generally speaking, outside of divorce, it is time-consuming to change your name officially, and you have to show you're not doing it to defraud anybody, people who are after you, people who want money from you, or all of that. But you are telling me that if you are doing it while getting divorced because you want to drop your married name, then it is a much quicker process, and it's a different process than the name process that one has to go through.
Oh yes, it's there's really no process to it at all. I would simply just write a simple sentence inside the final judgment of divorce stating that she is allowed to change her name to, and then I list the name, and that's it.
And what if the name that the person wants to go back to is not her unmarried name or her maiden name, but another new last name?
I have done that before. Yes, I've changed someone's first name before. You can change your name in the judgment of divorce.
So you can change your first name and you can change your last name, and your last name can be different than who your unmarried name or what your unmarried name was. No problem.
Yes, it's been done before. I've never had run into any issues with it. Most people wouldn't do that. They normally would go back to their maiden name, or if there was a gentleman that had changed his name for either religious reasons or because he's more progressive of a couple, then they can go back to their previous name prior to marriage as well. And they take their middle name as well. They change their middle name, so they switch it back to their original middle name.
Okay. Will the judge ask you under oath questions like any legal name change, that you're not doing this to defraud anybody or anything like that?
It has happened. There are times when somebody wants to change their middle name. A lot of women will change their middle name when they get married to their maiden name. So if your maiden name was Smith and your middle name was Marie, they'll drop Marie, get married, and change their middle name to Smith. So sometimes when they get divorced, it's very common that they'll come in and tell the judge that they'd really like to have their middle name and their maiden name restored to their full legal birth name. And the judge may ask a couple of questions as to, the reason why. It's not very common. Most of the time, if any question about it is asked at all by the judge, it's whether or not they in fact want their name changed and what they want it changed to. And then it's pretty much left at that. It's pretty easy process.
So this is a good time to make your name change. As you are finalizing your divorce, you just add a sentence in your judgment of divorce and done.
Yes, I would put that with the caveat that it doesn't mean that everything just automatically changes. You still have to go through the same process you did when you got married, which is you have to go to the Secretary of State and provide them, to get a new driver's license, and you're going to have to make all the same phone calls to everybody and let them know your name change, Social Security office and whatnot, in order to make sure that your name is legally changed on all of your identifying documentation.
And if they want proof of an official legal name change, all you have to do is provide a copy of your judgment of divorce. That's a sign of the court that became an order.
Yes.
Wonderful. Maria, let's take a very quick break. And when we return, I want to talk a little bit more about the factors that the law in Michigan, at least, talks about in considering whether or not two divorcing people or two legally separated people may have to pay or receive spousal support.
كاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تتمنى لكم السلامة في ظل انتشار وباء كوفيد-19. المحامية جومانا كيروز مثلت على مدى 22 عاما ضحايا حوادث السيارات مع طاقم من المحامين ذوي الخبرة، وحصلت لموكليها على تعويضات بمئات الملايين من الدولارات. قبل أن تختار المحامي الذي سيدافع عن قضيتك، دقق في تاريخه المهني. ومع مكاتب جومانا كيروز ستنذهل بآراء مئات الموكلين وخبراتهم الإيجابية في جوجل ريفيوز. مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز يتحدثون لغتك العربية والكلدانية. 248-557-3645 والاستشارة مجانية. Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز.
وبنرجع لبرنامجنا لليوم مع المحامية ماريا بانشينكو بعد عنا 20 دقيقة، وهي محاميتنا بقضايا الفاميلي لو. اليوم بلشنا بدراسة عن الرغبة بالطلاق اللي صارت بين العالم بكل أمريكا من بعد 3 أسابيع من اللوك داون. بعد 3 أسابيع من اللوك داون في كتير أشخاص أخذوا القرار إنه العلاقة تبعهم irretrievably broken and the damage is already done. ما عم نشوف نسبة الطلاق هلأ لأنه الحالة الاقتصادية غير ثابتة وفي كثير تردد عن الدخول بهذا الموضوع. عم نحكي عن الليجل بعتذر، عم نحكي عن spousal support، يعني وقت اللي شخص بالعلاقة الرجل وإنما ليس دائما الرجل بيدفع للطرف الثاني نفقة زوجية، هي مش نفقة للأطفال، هي نفقة زوجية. القانون بيقول بولاية ميشيغان إنه هذا مش تحصيل حاصل بالزواج، حتى لو الزواج عمره 30 و40 سنة ما في قانون بولاية ميشيغان بيقول إنه للأشخاص اللي متزوجين أكثر من 10 سنوات، أكثر من 20 سنة، أكثر من 30 سنة، الشخص اللي بيطلع مصاري اللي يدفع نفقة للشخص اللي ما بيطلع مصاري. القانون بيقول إنه إعطاء النفقة الزوجية is discretionary، يعني بترجع للقاضي، وإنما القانون بيقول إنه في عوامل عديدة ممكن والقاضي بعين الاعتبار ليحدد إذا هذا الطلاق هو نوع الطلاق اللي الشخص اللي عم يشتغل لازم يدفع نفقة زوجية للشخص الثاني اللي ما عم يشتغل. بإجمالا هو الرجل يدفع للمرأة بس، وإنما ليس دائما. من العوامل اللي المحكمة بتطلع عليها لتحدد إذا شخص لازم يدفع spousal support للشخص الثاني بالعلاقة هي عمر الطرفين، هي مدة الزواج، وهي من أكبر العوامل على فكرة اللي المحكمة بتطلع عليها، هي نسبة الدراسة بين الشخصين، هي المدخول لكل شخص، هي تاريخ الطرفين، هل اشتغلوا، قد ايه عملوا، شو اشتغلوا، هي كل سكيل سيت اللي عنده اياه الطرفين. يعني يمكن مثلا الزوجة ما عندها شهادة بس عندها خبرة، شاغلة بمكتب، يمكن مكتب محاماة بالماضي إلى آخره. هل رح يكون في دفع للأطفال، يعني نفقة للأطفال؟ هل في تاريخ ل domestic violence بين الشخصين؟ وهل في خيانة بين الشخصين؟ عوامل عديدة ولا وحدة منهم وحدة كافية. أكبر عامل بيأثر المحكمة بتطلع عليه لتحدد إذا شخص لازم يدفع للتاني spousal support هو مدة الزواج، السكيل سيت تبع الطرف الآخر. Attorney Maria Panchenko, I listed the factors in Arabic, but I want you to go over them. No one factor is dispositive, although you have pointed out to me that of all the factors, one particularly is more weighty than another. And what is that factor?
The length of the marriage.
Okay, so the longer the marriage, the more it is likely that one has to pay the other support. Give me another factor. Let's go through the factors.
The income of the parties. So if one party is making a certain income and the other party is making a great disparaging different amount of money or no money at all, this is another big factor.
Okay, let's talk about another factor.
So some of these factors, they have little details inside of them. So also, let's say, just talking about what we just said, which was, is somebody working or not? If somebody's not working, we're also going to have to talk about their ability to work. So what we had given before was that hypothetical situation with one of our callers. The woman had never worked before, but can she work? And that's when you had mentioned she had no skill set. So the ability of the person to work as well is a factor that's considered.
And also the past history of this person. Maybe they're not working right now, but maybe they were working, and what they were doing and how much money they were earning can be taken into consideration, because a court can tell the person, typically the woman, but not always, listen, you used to work in the past, make this many thousands of dollars a year, you have a transferable skill set, we are going to take this into consideration.
Absolutely. It's same, and on the opposite end of that spectrum, which is maybe the person's health. Maybe they worked in the past, but their health now forbids them to be able to work. Perhaps they have some kind of physical or mental ailment that does not allow them to work in the same capacity, and they have no other skill set. That's something we also have to look at when we're talking about their ability to work.
What about the education level of every party?
Absolutely. If somebody is working that has, let's say, a doctorate, and the other spouse has a high school diploma, this is something that's going to greatly impact that factor for their ability to work and their ability to contribute to the joint estate, because clearly one person has a much higher education and much more marketable to the workforce than the other person is. And if not so much marketable as their capacity to earn. So even if somebody has a high school diploma, they may be able to go get a job at, let's say, a restaurant, but they're never going to be making the amount of money or have the ability or capacity to earn the amount of money that somebody with the doctorate degree would be able to go and be marketable for. And that would still put in our situation a disparity in income. There's a great disparity in income between the two parties and their ability and capacity to earn.
I think along with that, you had mentioned in preparing for the show the age of the party. I assume because the older one who has been out of the workforce, the older that person, the less likely that person is able to find a job, even if she or he had a job in the past, correct?
Absolutely, as well as looking at the age of the parties on the opposite spectrum. How long is the person who would have to pay the spousal support going to be able to pay the spousal support? If you're being divorced at the age of 60 and you're maybe making $150,000 now, but soon you will be retired in only just 5 short years. That's something that we have to look at on both sides for both the payer and the payee.
By the way, the article that we were talking about, Maria, it mentioned that there has been an increase in life insurance policies as collateral for spousal support to make sure that the person died, because people were afraid for their life during the pandemic. Remember, in the early days, we were very, very, very scared with little information. We did not know if that was the end of our lives as we knew it. That's why more people wrote their wills. And the article says that more people bought and increased their life insurance proceeds as collateral to ensure that if they die and they still owe spousal support, the person who is owed spousal support can get it from life insurance.
Yes, it can be secured with life insurance. Absolutely.
Right. One of the other factors that you did mention when we were preparing is, will there be child support?
Yes, if there's a child support obligation that is also owed to the let's say the payee is the mother. So this person is going to possibly receive child support and spousal support. So determining how much spousal support will be paid is going to also depend on how much child support is being paid also by the same person that you are receiving spousal support from. So if you have children with your wife, you are making all of the money in the marriage and you're getting divorced, you're going to probably be paying some child support. And if you're looking at possibly having to pay spousal support, the court and the attorney should be looking at how much child support are you going to be paying before we determine how much spousal support you're going to have to pay.
And again, we say spousal support, it used to be called alimony. It's the same. You also said, was there a history or was there any domestic violence between the couple? What is that about?
Well, looking at fault, we talked about fault last time on the show, Joumana, and this is a no-fault state. You are entitled to a divorce without having to show fault. But what we did say is that when considering property division in alimony, fault might make a factor in alimony increase. You might be more likely to pay more or for longer or to pay at all if you have created some kind of fault in your marriage, like domestic violence.
And is that why infidelity is also a factor that a court will look at, whether there was infidelity between the couple?
Yeah, they'll look for fault. In infidelity and domestic violence and financial abuse or oppression, things of this nature would in fact be considered fault for the purposes of calculation of spousal support and to determine how much, how long, and whether or not you should pay at all in spousal support. So if there's an argument to be made on that front of fault, then we start looking at infidelity and domestic violence and determining it.
Okay, so we have talked about a number of factors that a court will look at to determine whether one person should pay the other person spousal support, also called alimony. There is no law that if you've been in a marriage for this long, you must pay alimony. Some marriages are less than 10 years, and the one person receives alimony. Some marriages are more than 10 years and the person does not receive alimony. I can see, for example, two doctors married to each other. They can be married for 25 years. Maybe one doctor is not going to receive spousal support from the other because their education level, their income, their skill set is there. So there is no need for spousal support. Spousal support makes up for the fact that the person on the other side who's being divorced does not have the kind of education or the skill set that will allow this person to get back to the marketplace and find a job. Is that really what the logic is behind it?
Yes, the past relationship of the parties is that one person is working, one person is not, and when they have to go forward in life, they don't want to trap somebody into supporting somebody for the rest of their life if the other person is able-bodied and going to be able to work and support themselves, but to start their life after the length of their time being married for that amount of time, or in that particular set of circumstances where they're out of the workforce and they're perhaps going to have some trouble finding a job. We can't just leave people out on the street. So that is what the original theory of thought from spousal support and alimony. And it isn't as common as it used to be, Joumana. Not everybody pays alimony anymore. And as it once was, much more common. But it's still there, and that's the theory. It is that we want to make sure that people aren't just being dropped off on the side of the road and good luck to you. They still put value on people who are homemakers, and this is how they do that.
Right. So going back to the gentleman who called us and changed his mind about filing for divorce, his wife never worked, so he has no skill set. The marriage is very long, 25 years. His wife does not speak English, so that limits her ability to go to the marketplace and find a job. And since she's never worked, she has no skill set. And he makes $150,000 a year. So we're almost certain, if not 100%, that someone like that, if he files for divorce, he will have to pay spousal support to his wife. By the way, let's say very quickly before we take a break that spousal support payments do not last forever. Some are for 2 years, some are for 5 years, for 10 years. It all depends on the circumstances. And I've also seen it in judgment of divorce that the paying person, typically, but not always the husband, will put a clause in the divorce judgment that his wife remarries, that the spousal support ends, correct?
That is very common, yes, upon death or remarriage.
Or remarriage. That is why I have seen people, women particularly, be in relationships with men and not marry them, because if they marry them, they're going to lose the spousal support they are getting from their ex. So they'll wait for that to end, sometimes 5 years, before they remarry again.
Very true, very common. And there is lifetime spousal support. I have seen it. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
But that's very rare.
Very rare. Very rare.
Let's take a very quick break and we will be back.
بحاجة للمساعدة في جلب شريك الحياة إلى الولايات المتحدة بالرغم من أن إجراءات الهجرة على أساس الزواج معقدة للغاية، إلا أن محامي الهجرة من مكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز تمكنوا بنجاح كبير مساعدة آلاف الأشخاص للهجرة إلى أمريكا، لأن لديهم الخبرة الطويلة في مساعدة الأشخاص على الحصول على الجرين كارد على أساس الزواج أو فيز الخطوبة بشكل سريع ومريح بقدر المستطاع. اتصل الآن بمكاتب المحامية جومانا كيروز 1866 Your Rights 248-557-3645. Your Rights مع المحامية جومانا كيروز.
وبنرجع لحلقتنا لليوم مع المحامية ماريا بانشينكو. عم نحكي عن فاميلي لو اليوم. كنا عم نحكي عن السباوزال سبورت اللي كثير من المستمعين بيعرفوه as alimony. بدنا ننتقل لشيء ما عنا كتير وقت، عنا 6 دقايق، فلح نبلش بس نطرح الموضوع لا أكثر ولا أقل. شيء بيسموه legal separation، يعني أوقات الأشخاص بيتجوزوا وبيعملوا annulment، يعني بعيون القانون كأنه مش متزوجين. طبعا there are grounds legal annulment، نادرا ما هي ينعطى، لأنه بعيون القانون الإنسان اللي بيحصل على annulment يعني فسخ الزواج، يعني كأنه بحيث ما كان متزوج، يعني بعيون المجتمع وبعيون القانون كان غير متزوج. في شيء اسمه divorce، كل المستمعين بيعرفوا شو هو، وفي شيء تاني اسمه legal separation، أو الجملة المضبوطة هي action for separate maintenance، ما بيسموها legal separation. يمكن نحن بنحكي بنقول legally separated، بس هي it's an action مش for divorce مش for annulment، بيسموها action for separate maintenance. بدي بس بالوقت اللي الباقي عنا بدي أسأل المحامية ماريا بانشينكو، شو أكتر سبب في عنا كتير من المستمعين من الشرق الأوسط اللي بيتصلوا بمكتبنا بيحبوا بيسألوا عن الليجل سيبريشن قبل ما يسألوا عن الديفورس، مع إنه بالنهاية أغلبيتهم بيقرروا إنه يعملوا ديفورس مش ليجل سيبريشن. أغلبية المتصلين اللي بيهمهم موضوع الليجل سيبريشن هن الرجال مش النساء. رح نحكي شوي عن الأسباب الدينية والأسباب المادية اللي بتشجع أغلبية المتصلين إنه يسألوا على معلومات أكثر عن legal separation. Attorney Maria Panchenko, can you tell us why a number of our Middle Eastern callers to the office inquire and are very interested in legal separation, also called action for separate maintenance? Can you tell us why? What are the biggest reasons? Can you tell us why you have noticed that more men ask about legal separation or separate maintenance than women?
A lot of what has been communicated to me is that the concern of the religious aspects and the cultural aspects of being divorced is not something that they're really desirable for them and their children. They're concerned about the stigma that this might give to their children in their communities, but also considering that in a divorce action, if you practice certain faith, you may have some kind of a dowry payment or a mahr payment, and if you are getting divorced, you would have to pay that, a legal separation would ultimately avoid that payment.
Okay, so let's break down your answers. Do you agree with me, based on our discussion before the radio, that the number one reason why a lot of ethnic people, including Middle Eastern people, want to avoid divorce and explore at least the possibility of legal separation is religious beliefs?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Would you also agree that closely related to the religious beliefs is cultural beliefs, the reputation in the community? Better have the reputation that you're legally separated than have the reputation that you are divorced?
Yes, that is something that I believe it's a pretty close second to their religious beliefs.
Would you agree with me that a lot of men are more interested in legal separation than women because they don't like that stigma of having their kids be called the children of divorce?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very big concern for a lot of gentlemen that I've spoken to.
Okay, so I think we can safely say that the number one reason in our Middle Eastern community for the interest in legal separation is religious beliefs, reputation in the community, and not having your children be stuck with the stigma that you are the children of divorce rather than you're the children of legally separated. And I also think men like that possibility because I think they feel at least that they have more control over their children if they are just legally separated from the wife rather than divorced.
Yes, that definitely is a possibility. There's a lot of concern with men of different cultural backgrounds, but also Middle Eastern, that if they get divorced, they will lose. That there has been concern conveyed to me that from many men that they believe they will completely lose their children if there's a divorce. It's not true, but it's what they believe. They're very nervous about this aspect. We barely scratched the surface. So God willing, next time we're on the radio, we're going to continue this discussion about the separation. But the 2 minutes remaining, I just want to add that for legal separation or an action for separate maintenance to happen, both parties have to agree. A lot of times a man will file an action for separate maintenance or divorce, but the wife is not on board. The judge is going to convert that into an action for divorce. Am I correct? Yes, if the wife is not on board with separate maintenance, then she can file for divorce and the divorce action will go forward. Because you can't stop someone from getting a divorce.
Okay, so you cannot stop somebody from getting a divorce, and both people don't have to agree to have a divorce, but both people have to agree to have legal separation. Attorney Maria Panchenko, that was another amazing show. I personally learned a lot today about support and also legal separation. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you to all of our listeners. Rami, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And God willing, we will be tomorrow 1 p.m.
أكيد تحياتنا لك ونلتقيك بكرة إن شاء الله، ونشكر لكل مستمعينا حسن المتابعة. دمتم في رعاية الله، إلى اللقاء.